I saw the body of my father, naked, lying on the floor, burnt, serious neck wounds, nose coming, there was blood coming out of his nose, there was blood coming.
It was the last evening of July 2025. The sun had dipped behind the Nairobi skyline, and the streets of Thome Estate had settled into the quiet rhythm of dusk. On that evening, Allan Kioko Kitavi walked slowly through the gate of his second wife's home. He was calm, unsuspecting, carrying nothing more than an ordinary envelope. But inside that envelope were documents that could stir unrest in any family. They contained the official division of 60 acres of land among his 8 siblings. Those pages represented his legacy, his effort to prevent conflict after his death. Instead, they may have sealed his fate. At 8 p.m., CCTV cameras captured Kitavi entering the compound. He looked composed and unaware of the shadows that lingered inside. For the next 40 minutes, silence cloaked the house. By 8:40 p.m., 2 men were seen leaving, and then the silence shattered. When neighbors rushed to the driveway later that night, they found a scene out of a nightmare. Kitavi's lifeless body lay sprawled on the ground. It was partially burned and with signs of strangulation. Besides him, the envelope with his property documents remained. The legacy he hoped to protect was scattered around him, stained by betrayal and fire. What happened in those final moments raises concerns. Also, who may have followed him into the house of silence and why? This is Dark Our Dogs, and this is the mind-bending, terrifying story of the murder of Allan Kioko Kitavi in his own home. Allan Kioko Kitavi was a man of many roles, each a piece of a complex puzzle. He was a husband and a father. He was married to Dorothy Kitavi, and they had children, Alvin Kitavi and Joy Kitavi. Aged 66 at the time of his death, he had dedicated his life to both teaching and community leadership. As a lecturer at the Kenya Power and Lighting Company Training School, he shaped young professionals destined to keep Kenya's light on. But his labors extended beyond classrooms. He served as the chairperson of the Komarok Residents Association Board of Trustees, a position that made him a living landmark in local civic life. Yet, beneath the polished veneer of public service, lay a domestic world full of undercurrents. Kitavi had 2 wives. With his first wife Dorothy, he had built a life and acquired land together. But the balance tipped after his second marriage. Dorothy would later say, things changed when Kitavi got married to his second wife. This hinted at the strains brewing under the surface. Land became the fault line splitting loyalty and blood. Land is an ultimate symbol of legacy in Kenya and a critical dividing line for many. Kitavi owned around 60 acres in his rural home, a substantial legacy by any measure. 2 months before his death, he reported to Kasarani police station that key documents had gone missing. These were title deeds, land allocation certificates, academic credentials, and his logbook. Such losses are seldom accidental in such fraught contexts. Then came the fateful evening. At 7:41 p.m. on July 31, 2025, CCTV footage picked him at a cyber cafe, printing land allocation documents from an email. This involved plans to divide the 60-acre parcel equally among his 8 siblings. Each would receive at least 7.2 acres. Armed with those papers, he returned home, carrying them in a brown envelope. These were documents meant to grant clarity and perhaps in the final hour, ensure fairness. That envelope would become the haunting artifact of his death. In that single act of drafting a transparent future, Kitavi might have triggered forces that he never anticipated. A man who taught light and community ended up engulfed in darkness. His own legacy now seared by suspicion, paper, and fire. What he could not have known was that these very papers meant to preserve peace would become the prelude to bloodshed. February 5, 2025 began like any other day for Dr. Allan Kioko Kitavi. The lecturer had left his Syokimau home for routine errands and meetings, but by nightfall, the respected chairman of the Komarok Residents Association would lie dead. The sequence of events leading to that moment has since been pieced together by investigators, neighbors, and chilling CCTV footage. Kitavi arrived home at 5 p.m. on Thursday, July 31st, after a busy day. He was visibly in high spirits as he interacted with his family. He appeared relaxed, even jovial, but shortly after, he stepped out of the house, telling them he needed to run some personal errands at a nearby shopping center. That would be the last time they saw him alive. By 7:30 p.m., CCTV cameras positioned around his Thome Estate residence captured two men walking towards the compound. They looked calm, unhurried, almost as though they belonged. But investigators would later say those steps marked the beginning of a carefully planned murder. At 8:11 p.m., the cameras caught Kitavi himself, strolling casually back towards the house. He carried a brown envelope. These were the land allocation documents he had just printed at a cyber cafe. His demeanor was carefree, almost cheerful. He even whistled as he walked home, unaware of the deadly trap waiting inside. For nearly 30 minutes, there was no movement. Then at 8:40 p.m., one of the suspects was seen leaving the house, followed closely at 8:41 p.m. by the second man. Both walked away briskly, but without panic. They seemed cool, deliberate, and confident. It was only later when the family went searching that the true horror of those missing minutes came to light. By 10 p.m., relatives grew anxious. Kitavi was a man of routine, rarely out late, and never without informing someone. They began looking for him. Just 25 meters from the homestead, in the driveway, they found his lifeless body. The scene was devastating. His remains bore clear signs of a struggle. His body was unclothed, showing severe trauma to the neck, blood seeping from his nose and head. Investigators later confirmed that he had died from manual neck compression. He had been strangled by force until he could no longer breathe. A kitchen knife recovered nearby was kept as an exhibit. But perhaps most chilling was what had been done after his death. Parts of his body had been partially burned, as though his killers wanted to destroy evidence or desecrate him even further. Beside him lay fragments of the envelope, the land documents scotched but still identifiable. The very papers meant to settle disputes in peace had instead become the symbol of his violent end. The discovery shook his family and friends to the core. Neighbors gathered in disbelief. One of his sons, speaking later, recalled what he saw through tears. "I saw my father's body without clothes, burnt, with serious neck wounds and blood coming out of his nose and head. It was a really dark picture." Meanwhile, detectives at Kasarani police station launched a probe, quickly zeroing in on one suspect seen on CCTV, Stephen Kioko. He was Allan Kitavi's stepson. The motive, investigators believed, was rooted in bitter disputes over family property. But for those who watched the footage, the story was already clear. The calm entry, the carefree return, and the silent exit of two men. Kitavi's fate had been sealed long before that evening. What unfolded on July 31st was not random. It was a cold execution carried out in silence under the watchful eyes of cameras that told the story frame by frame. This is how the timeline of betrayal unfolded. The sequence was chilling in its precision. At 7:21 p.m., Kitavi sends his email dividing land. At 7:30 p.m., two men enter the compound. At exactly 8:11 p.m., Kitavi arrives home. He is likely murdered inside between 8 and 8:40 p.m. as CCTV shows the men leaving his house at 8:40 and 8:41 p.m. At 10 p.m., the family discovers his body on the driveway. Every step suggested premeditation. Whoever killed him knew his schedule, knew he would be carrying those documents, and knew he would return that evening. The fact that the killers lingered inside the house until after his arrival leaves little doubt. They were waiting for him, and they were not strangers.
Forty-seven has learned that the chairman of Komarok Residents Association, Allan Kitavi, had printed some documents relating to his land allocation to his families just before his murder.
Investigations quickly narrowed to one prime suspect, Allan Kioko Kitavi's stepson. What moved him to the center of the probe wasn't rumor, it was tape. This was the CCTV footage showing the two men entering the Thome compound before the arrival of Kitavi and exiting moments later. Detectives believe that it was this time bracket that the murder occurred inside the house. Those CCTV images and witness corroborations are what led police to detain Stepson as the main suspect pending further investigations. Also, beneath the timeline lies a family war over property. According to Kitavi's first wife, Dorothy, the Thome Estate plot where the body was found is tied yet to more drama. The plot, she claimed, was originally acquired by the couple before he later embraced polygamy. In the weeks before the murder, relatives discussed relocating the second wife to a different plot. These talks may have underscored deepening tensions in the household leading up to the murder. Put together, the puzzle pointed squarely at Allan Kioko. The motive was ongoing disputes, opportunity, and presence. Disputes were over family land and property, opportunity involved access to the home, and his presence was captured on CCTV within the critical window. Detectives at Kasarani publicly indicated that acquisition of family property is a leading line of inquiry. They, however, stressed that the case is active and all suspects are presumed innocent until proven guilty. Amid the grief, the family's legal representative urged restraint and due process, promising full cooperation with investigators. Justice should be pursued through the proper legal channels without prejudging the outcome. It was a reminder that even in a story of betrayal and fire, the truth must be built carefully, piece by piece, until the full picture holds. Today, the driveway where Kitavi's body was found is quiet again. The gates are closed. The compound, once filled with laughter and routine, is heavy with silence, but questions linger like ghosts in the night. Did Stepson act alone, or was this a conspiracy wider than it appears? Was the motive only land, or did deeper resentments within the family fuel the act? And why the partial burning? Was it panic, rage, or a warning? In the end, the land division papers remained beside his body, untouched by fire, as though mocking the very cause of his death. They were supposed to preserve peace. Instead, they became evidence of betrayal. For the community, his murder was more than a private tragedy. It was a reminder of how fragile trust can be, how property can turn families into enemies, and how a man respected by his leadership could meet his end at the hands of those closest to him. In the stillness of Thome Estate, the questions remain. Who truly killed Allan Kioko Kitavi, and what was worth more that night? Land or blood? This has been Dark Hour Dogs. Remember, monsters don't always lurk in the dark alleys. Sometimes they share the very roofs we sleep under.